Hi, I'm Christine Giordano with Markets Group. My next guest is Robin Diamonte, CIO of RTX, the company formerly known as Raytheon. Robin is known as a key leader in the global pension industry by her chief investment officer peers and those she has worked with. Besides heading one of the largest corporate pension funds in the United States, she's been raising funded levels significantly at whatever plan she works at. She headed UTC's due diligence when it merged with Raytheon, and she was appointed to the PBGC by then President Barack Obama. And on a national scale, she used her position to help create strategies that helped pension investors hedge their risks across the United States, reducing volatility in their funds. Robin has argued that benchmarks might actually keep performance low, and what companies really need is strategy on how to save on pension costs, how to improve funded statuses, and how to reduce volatility. She headed a firm that became one of the first to use derivative exposures in US fixed income, US equity, and international equity. Now, she's also finding ways to get workers without pensions to have lifetime income. And she's known to have a heart for the pensioner, as well as a sharp intellect for her corporation. But Robin wasn't always an investor, and we will talk about some of her life's accomplishments, what she's been working on, what she sees as threats to the industry, and her advice to her peers and those rising to the chief investment officer seats in this next interview. Stay tuned. Welcome, Robin.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks for having me.
A real pleasure. Thank you. We'll be honoring you with a Hall of Fame pretty soon, coming up in the fall. And I just wanted to have this moment to interview you and kind of learn things from you that others can kind of incorporate even into their own processes. Robin, let's start with your early career. You weren't always in finance, and you came at it from an interesting angle.
Very true. As a matter of fact, I never even planned on going into college. So when I went to a high school, it was a technical high school for electronics. And in between, when I graduated high school, I worked in the submarine as an electrician on the night shift. And it was the folks in the union who convinced me to go to school for electrical engineering. And I went to school and got my bachelor's in electrical engineering in New Haven, and that's where I grew up, in New Haven, Connecticut. And I went to college there, and my first job was in New Haven as a microwave radio engineer. And I was actually putting in microwave systems on top of very large buildings that had line of sight. And I'm dating myself, of course, but that's when fiber optics started to become in the mainstream. And so microwave technology was dying. And I had to really find something else to do because I was bored at my job. And they dropped PCs on our desks. And actually it was in everybody's area, you had one PC. And it was at the time where you actually turned on the computer and all there was a DOS prompt, nothing else. So they dropped the computer and a bunch of books. And people really did not know how to use them in the business world. I thought it was fun. I read the books. I learned how to use different software systems. And I really changed my career to be a computer help desk person. And that's the origin of how I got into investments, because I was working at the help desk for a couple of years, and then Verizon was looking for a technology person in their investment department to actually help their investment team become better at data analysis and building reports and doing portfolio management. So I started as their technology person, basically under the desks of all the portfolio managers, doing the wiring of the hardware, and then all the different software programs.
Wow. Okay. And that puts you in a good position at the Verizon investment office, who was then CIO Britt Harris.
Absolutely. I went into Britt one day after I was working in technology for a while, and there was an opening in entry-level research. And I went into his office and I asked him if I could switch over from technology to research. And he warned me that when you worked in a technology area, that it was very fast paced. And then if I left for a year or so, that I would probably, just fall behind. And I said I would take that chance that, this portfolio management industry seemed a lot more exciting than computers at the time. And he took a chance on me.
Wow. Okay. So was there a trial period where, you'd give it a year, and if it didn't work out, you both agreed that you'd kind of go back to what you were doing? Or what
Yeah.
was there like some unspoken agreement? And why did you think it would be so much more exciting for you?
I love the research oriented side of it, and I saw the analysis that they were doing, and there was scenarios where you could lose money or win money, and we had a research group that at the time wasn't delivering the type of research that Britt wanted. And I think that my background with math and my computer skills, I felt could really help them grow their expertise in this area and design the computer programs that they were looking for to help us with our research.
So you kind of built a platform, if I remember correctly. Um,
I
how did
did.
you revise that? Yeah.
Yeah, so we had different portfolio managers who were analyzing investment managers at the time. And every portfolio manager had a different way that they would like to look at historical returns or holdings. And each one would come to our research department and say, can you do this analysis? Can you do this analysis? It was very time consuming and every report was different. So at the time, I standardized I built this system in Excel, and I built a system where the portfolio manager themselves could upload any stream of his investment manager returns. And then just by picking some lists, they were able to create like a 5-page report that showed every statistic that you ever want on a manager and its returns versus a benchmark going back in time.
Highly efficient for comparisons.
Yes, absolutely. And that started, I would say, was my first small success in the research team. And over time, I actually took over the research team.
So then you headed the research team.
Then I was head of the research team. And my first very large project was taking over the savings plan. At the time, the HR departments used to take over, they used to do all the investments for savings plans. And they would do stable value portfolios or insurance companies. And a couple of the insurance companies blew up. And it was at that point where they said, HR people shouldn't be, picking the investments. We should have the investment group do that. So I had to take over the savings plan. And it was at that point where I started working with Morningstar and Fidelity and really learned more about investing.
And from there?
From there, Britt gave me a little bit more and more responsibility. So overseeing the strategic partnerships, all of our external managers, our asset allocation, our research. And eventually I was sort of like his number two. And then I got tapped on the shoulder to be the CIO of UTC.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was almost 20 years ago.
Through every point in your career, you were the person who took over the computer that was dropped in the department. You're the person that revamped the research department. You seem to have a way of rising through the ranks. When UTC merged with then Raytheon, now RTX, you were chosen to be the person who headed both plans and merged them together. What is it that you find gives you, that turbo boost to the top of the ladder, so to speak?
People ask me that sometimes, and it's not exactly intelligence. It's a little bit of emotional intelligence or really understanding what your customer wants. And I go back to school days. I was always able to get very good grades in school, and not because I was the smartest student at all. It's that I would sit there in the beginning of our semester or our class, and listened to the teacher and understand exactly what they were looking for, and was able to, whatever I had to do, build essays or create equations and give the teacher what they wanted. And I've done that in business. I've worked for managers, and I have, my customer now is the CFO and our investment committee and the board. And you listen and you say, how do they define success? And you think a little bit out of the box, you create yourself a great team, and you provide the customer what they want. So back in the day, it was Britt Harris. And then since then, I've had a lot of supervisors, and try to always ask that question. And I think that's what has actually helped me to be successful in this business.
And of course, you've got the medal as well. You've significantly raised the funded levels of each plan that you've taken over. Can you go into some detail on that?
Yeah, again, it's about understanding what the focus is or the mission of your group. Right, so back in the 1990s, chief investment officers and investment teams really didn't understand what liabilities were. All we were really is a moneymaker for the company. We provided great returns. We outperformed our liabilities. Again, we didn't understand what that was, but we knew that they were putting a benefit into our employees, and we had returns that were so much superior than that, and that those returns flowed right into the EPS of all public companies. So they were very happy with our performance. And then over time, we had a couple of crises. We had the tech bubble bust, and then the global financial crisis. And we had perfect storms during those periods where equity markets went down and interest rates went down at the same time. So many of the corporations found that their funded status went from well over 100% down into the 70s. And that happened with UTC. And I think it was the immediate realization of, our mission is not to get great investment returns. Our mission is to get great investment returns, but also understand what our liabilities were. So the mission at that point, when our funded level was only 70%, was let's fill in the gap so that we get to 100% or 110 or whatever is needed. And we do that in a way that we're not taking a lot of risk versus our liabilities. So there was the introduction of LDI, or liability driven investing, and we had to combine that type of new investing, but also be aware of what the company needed. So you always had to find a solution that was win-win. Be a great fiduciary to the employees, but at the same time, be a great corporate citizen, so that you're not causing the company too much pain when it comes to contributions into the plan or volatility of market returns.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And you've also used different techniques to keep risks low. I think you were pretty new to, or you were perhaps one of the first to derivative?
We used derivatives early on. We used derivatives for not for taking a lot of leverage at all. It was really for risk control. We used derivatives for rebalancing the portfolio, for liquidity management, and we used it for portable alpha. And we were one of the very first funds to have a significant portable alpha portfolio. But we did it in a way where we were using futures and derivatives to take underlying beta risk, but we were given the cash to hedge funds. And that seemed scary at the time, but there were not hedge funds that were correlated with the underlying beta. They were hedge funds that were absolute return. So we were successful in saying, if the underlying futures were an S&P 500, then the alpha was just 3 to 4% above that. So we weren't taking significant risks, and we weren't being correlated to the underlying market. So we were able to be very successful using derivatives early on.
And currently, everyone always wants to know what managers you hire or who you're looking to hire.
Yeah, people ask about our business and talent and the type of people that I hire to do this. I always say it's more of an art than a science. because there's not one specific manager that you would use. You don't say, well, I just want fundamental managers, or I want quantitative managers. There's so many investment managers out there. So we look for a lot of different qualities. We look for qualities where we really see that the portfolio managers are passionate about what they do. We have to see a competitive advantage or an edge that they have in their style versus what the benchmark is. We're always looking for significant risk control in their policies, their processes, because reputation risk is very important to us. We don't want to see our name on the, RTX's pension fund invested in a hedge fund that blew up, so we're very careful about that our managers have risk control. So it's really a combination of understanding what the manager is doing. If we don't understand it and it's a black box, we don't invest in it. Understanding why we think they have a competitive advantage, when they're going to outperform and underperform, and then building a portfolio to optimize those different sort of those return streams and those styles over time. So it's not one specific manager, it's really the characteristics of the manager.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any red flags in managers that, kind of steer you away from them?
Yeah, there's definitely some red flags. If we see processes that were the same, that, it's just a brand new, it's packaged in a brand new form with a cute little name, but it's a factor analysis that we've been doing, for the last 30 years is a red flag. So it's a new name over an old process. Lack of risk control. Sometimes it's historical performance and only certain periods over time. So maybe their style is really arbitraging something that's happening in the market, but it's probably or may not be persistent. So you're thinking that, okay, you understood how to make money in an environment, say when interest rates were falling, but can you do that if they're rising? So there's some red flags if you ask questions and you look at back testing and it's not a robust analysis.
And it's 2024. It's late summer, somewhat.
Yeah.
People are still talking about liquidity in their portfolios.
Yeah.
What are you doing for liquidity in yours?
Yeah, so most corporate plan sponsors, not all, but most of them are getting pretty close to being fully funded. And there's a lot of pension or plan sponsors that are de-risking. And that means shifting from their growth in equity and very liquid assets to a bond portfolio. And a lot of us have a lot of private equity, private credit, direct real estate, which we have, that's less liquid. So we have very large pension benefit payments that are due every month. And we're needing to get out of those growth assets that are not necessarily liquid. So we've been, we do an analysis every month that looks at the liquidity profile of our portfolio, and we put it in buckets, like how much of the portfolio could we liquidate in a couple of days, in a week, in a month, or more than 3 months, and need to feel very comfortable with that strategy. We also make sure that we hold enough liquidity for several months of benefit payments and very sort of either cash or short duration bonds. So we're always looking at the liquidity of our portfolio, and we have 2 portfolios that are significantly large that we call policy management portfolios, and they're basically derivatives. One is a bucket of equity derivatives and one's bond derivatives, and we use that for liquidity. So we're getting we have the underlying assets in cash, but we're using futures to get the exposure. So at any time, if we need the liquidity, we just take off the derivative exposure and we have the cash. And we're always replenishing those portfolios. And we've been doing that for many years, and it's worked very successfully.
What percentage of your portfolio does that?
Oh, it's a significant percentage because of our portable alpha portfolio. So remember I said our portable alpha portfolio is about 12% of our overall portfolio. And so we're getting 12% of our exposure through derivatives. and then the rest of it is sort of cash that's invested. So we keep a pretty significant margin or a percentage of that that's available for cash.
And are your plans open or closed, frozen?
So they are, because we've acquired many companies over time and we're trying to synchronize the benefits. There are different pockets of the company who has different types of benefits. So some of our union plans are open to new entrants, but there's very few. So most of the company is hard frozen to all new employees. The majority of it is hard frozen so that they're no longer accruing in a traditional pension plan. And there's a small piece of the plan where there's a cash balance plan that's still open. So it's all over the place.
Robin, I know a big theme throughout your career, throughout your emphasis in working with the PBGC, has been lifetime income for all workers or pensioners. Can you tell me how you came to that?
Yeah, so, there's a point in your career, because I've been doing this for a long time, where, you stop being very competitive and you just want to get the best investment returns. You have to have sort of meaning in your job. And for me, it was, all right, what's the meaning to my job? And the meaning was that I want to make sure that regardless of who it is, if it's RTX employees or just other corporations employees, that they get the benefits that they were promised when they were working so hard their whole life. So, I mean, that's the goal of our job, is that people work their whole life, they work very hard, they get to a retirement age, and then they expect to live for another 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years now without working, and they need to have enough money to retire. And so that's our goal. That's ultimately, that should be always our goal. And what we did with the PBGC, I was lucky enough to be on the advisory committee for the PBGC, and I started in 2013 when the PBGC had a deficit of like $35 billion. And the PBGC was very well run at the time, but there was a lot of different competing philosophies on how the asset allocation should be completed, whether they should look like a pension fund and have growth assets to close the deficit, or whether they should be an insurance company and have only bond assets. And unfortunately, depending on who took over, they kept on switching their strategy, at the wrong time. And we had a great advisory group, and we got together and we worked with the board of the PBGC, which is like the Secretary of Labor, the Secretary of Treasury, and really introduced to them the concept of LDI, and had to bring in certain managers to work with their CIO team and the advisory committee, and to really develop a really good, robust LDI program. And it was at the same time where, they were starting to raise some premiums also. And they really embraced this new concept. And now their entire portfolio is mostly hedged to the liabilities. And now they have a surplus of, well over $30 billion. So they went from minus 35 billion to close to 30 billion in 10 years. So it's, I wasn't solely responsible for that, it was the markets, but I do take pride in the fact that, I was part of an advisory committee that was able to support sort of a new type of asset allocation strategy that worked really well for them. And then you asked about lifetime income. So lifetime income is different. So lifetime income is, when all the corporate plans were freezing the pension plans, right? We knew that our new employees were going to have significant risk going forward. So they were not going to be able to retire and have an annuity for the rest of their life. They were going to retire with a lump sum of money, and it was up to them to invest it in a way that they had enough money to live comfortably, but not run out of money, right? So we didn't want our employees to sit there not spending money, to live, in a poor state, so that because they were afraid they were outlive their money, or the worst case scenario is that, their money runs out when they're 80 years old and they live to 90. And that was the beauty of a DB plan. was all the mortality pooling, and that you knew how much money that you can rely on for the rest of your life. So what lifetime income was about was trying to get a product that provided an annuity-like benefit in the DC plan, because the DC plan was going to be the way of the future. That was going to be the vehicle that employees were going to have to use to save for the future in retirement. So we started really early on, around 2007, 2008, researching different products, and we put one in about 12 or 13 years ago. And it's our default option, and our new employees are automatically enrolled in it. And and they can opt out and go into other types of investment options. But if they do stay in it and decide to withdraw the money later on, they have almost the best of both worlds. They have a portfolio that has high balance that they can access at any time, and they also have an annuity guaranteed for the rest of their life. So that's what the lifetime income product's all about.
What percentage of the employee's salary goes into it?
So when we start off a new employee, we auto enroll them at 6%, and then we auto escalate them 1% a year for 4 years. So when they're done, they have they are contributing 10% of their salary if they don't stop it in the meantime. So they're contributing 10%. The company will match 4% of the first 6. So if you're an employee and if you work for the company for 4 years, you're getting 10% of your salary going into savings. The company's putting 4% in as a match. So that's 14%. And then because we closed the pension plan, they're also getting an additional contribution from the company into the savings plan in lieu of the pension plan. And that ranges anywhere from 3 to 7% based upon your age. So it's a really nice benefit.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you could actually be having 17% into
17.8% of your salary going in, which is sort of the rule of thumb. 15 between 15 and 20, you should be saving in order to replace adequate income when you retire.
How difficult is this to establish within a company?
12 years ago, it was difficult because there was not a product like it. So you have to get buy-in from multiple organizations. So you have to have the investment team to really understand the product. You have to have the HR team to say, yes, I'm going to embrace this, and do all the communications and have all the systems in place so that people can actually choose this option. And then you need your ERISA lawyers to be able to feel comfortable that the strategy is going to work and they're not going to get sued later on. So I was lucky enough to have an extremely good relationship with with all of our folks in HR. I had a great investment team, and we picked apart constantly the strategy before we implemented it. And then I had fantastic, and I still have fantastic ERISA lawyers who, always put the fiduciary first and, figured out a way to sort of address legal concerns. So now, though, roll 12 years later, finally, there are some large institutions and investment managers who are coming out with these sort of off-the-shelf viable lifetime income products. So I think we're going to start to see some large corporate plan sponsors start to introduce that into their plans, which I'm really excited about.
So it's kind of like a one-stop shop now, and getting it all together. Nice.
That's right.
Wonderful. You've also been working with the Aspen Institute, and you've made some interesting findings on your own. Can you get into that?
Yeah, so the Aspen Institute has a finance advisory committee that I've been on for multiple years, and the purpose was to get a large corporate plan sponsor to be on the committee so that they can help set different policies and products and things for all Americans to save for retirement. So not just people who are lucky enough to work for large corporations. So how do we address the retirement crisis, which is coming in America? And so I'm lucky enough to be on this advisory committee. And one of the things that they recently decided to take a look at was about diversity. and are underrepresented groups saving in a similar way as, say, a white man or a white female. And I thought that that was a really interesting thesis because, you know, we hear oftentimes that different underrepresented groups are not saving as much. And I thought, sort of, you know, egotistically, well, I have one of the best savings plans in the world and everybody has access to this. So, you know, I think when I look at the data, everybody's going to be saving in a similar way. You know, we have the same, but that wasn't the case. So what the Aspen Institute is doing is they have a special project where they're taking data from all large corporate plans and they're trying to build a very robust data set to understand what's happening and why is it happening so that we can fix it. And we were one of the first large corporate plans to provide data into this. And what we found is that there are discrepancies, even when you normalize for salary, which, you know, is unusual. You normalize for salary, you normalize for tenure, you normalize for age, and you still see discrepancies. So what this study did was it looked at 8 different categories. It looked at white, Asian, Hispanic, and Black, female, and males. And then it normalized for salary and it looked at lots of different factors. And what we found was interesting. We found that Asian women were actually the best savers, even ahead of white men. We found that Black females and Hispanic females had the lowest balances across, even normalized for salary, across all salary ranges. And when we dug into this a little bit more, what we realized is that they may not be saving as much, which was a small contributor, that they were a little bit more risk adverse, so not as much in equity, but more importantly, they were taking out more loans and they were taking out hardship withdrawals, which means that they were taking money out of their savings plan for other reasons. So what are we doing with this information? We're trying to build more communications, education, designing benefits around this and trying to understand why. So we're meeting with various ERG groups, talking to people saying, what do you think this is the reason? And finding some really interesting things. One of the things that we found is that, you know, there are unexpected medical issues. People need to help family members because of cultural reasons. And what's happening is they're pulling from their savings. And they're pulling from, you know, their savings plan. So we're trying to provide education around why that doesn't make sense and building and hoping to helping to help them build an emergency savings fund and the education to use that first. And that's just one example of the many ways that we're trying to address some of the issues that or the differences that we're seeing in the data.
I remember reading years ago, there was a study that showed that people, you know, were pulling from their savings to help their kids through college or their grandkids through college. And it made the point of saying, hey, these kids can make that money back if they take loans their whole lives. You've only got a few years left here. Is that intuitive though? I mean, it's always
hard for people. I mean, we have tools. There's tools that you can find on the internet, but as a company, we actually hired a vendor and we put financial wellness tools in place. And we use a combination of that and Morningstar's tools and this to help our participants actually think about, all right, I have loans coming out to college. I want to buy a house. I have this income in, and I also want to save for retirement. And also I have to pay down this credit card. So what do you do first? You know, how much of your money goes here? How much money of it goes there? And it really depends on an individual circumstance. But we do have some of these tools, and there's tools that are out there that if you're willing to spend time on them and put in all the data, you know, it will optimize a portfolio for you, or it will optimize like a budget and help you through those types of analysis.
interesting. Thanks. Just changing things up a little bit. When I speak with other CIOs about you and say, well, what is one of the things that you'd like to hear Robin talk about? What comes up is the fact that you're an extraordinary, not only an investor, but a mentor. You have like this incredible ability um, to mentor your staff and in such a way that they can fail. They can learn. They perhaps have training wheels on. Can we go into, and they can't be poached in some ways. I hear stories about your staff being offered great positions, but wanting to stay in your office. Can we talk a little bit about your philosophy around staff development and, obviously we're in the post-COVID environment, how you're kind of managing all of that?
Yeah, can I say some of it has been luck? I just, and I say the philosophy is that if you're managing a corporate pension plan in a place that's not New York or Boston, it's hard to get, or like a major city, it's hard to get really good finance people. So I always look for people who have grown up in the area, who went to like some fancy school. It doesn't even have to be a fancy school, but went to some, business school, loved finance, did their stint in Boston or New York, and now they want to start a family and they want to come back. And what happens is if somebody is in that mode where they want to be intellectually challenged, they want to take ownership, but they want flexibility in their time so that they can coach their kids' soccer team or go home and have dinner with their family and then maybe jump on the computer. And that's sort of been my management style. My management style has been you hire super smart people who have this intellectual curiosity, who love working for one of the largest funds in the world so that we can call up any investment manager and say, hey, I'm interested in your product. Can you come down to our office and, let me hear about that. And that helps. The ability to be able to talk to so many managers when somebody loves the investment business is really helpful. And then I try to give them the autonomy to make the decisions on their own. So, once they are mentored appropriately and understand the philosophy and the mission of the group, then here's your portfolio. If it's global equity or LDI, and it's, you hire and fire managers, and I will be there to provide guidance or to question you. Is this what you really want to do? Think about this. But ultimately, it's their decision. And when you give somebody flexibility and autonomy, it creates an environment where they're happy with their job, hopefully.
And you've also started projects in which they can apply their investment acumen.
Yeah, we're always trying to do something that's a little bit different. So we started strategic partnerships, which we did at Verizon, which is really get one of the best managers that you think in the world and give them a portfolio or a lump sum and say, okay, manage this money better than us. So we did this, so we go through an RFP and we figure out who those managers are. We give them a lump sum and we say, okay, you have to be 8% over a long term. So that was one of the things that we did. We had a flexible capital portfolio, which was anything that you find that doesn't fit nicely into our current asset allocation buckets. You have to bring that idea and create a paper, and you have to go through certain gates, and all the portfolio analysts work together on these ideas and then brought it up through sort of the director level. And then we would sort of pick apart their idea and they'd go back and get the questions answered. And if, they got all the answers questioned and they had a good theory, we put money in it. And we did that for a while. And it was supposed to be $1 billion portfolio, and that was fun, but then we had to sort of de-risk. So, we disbanded that portfolio, but we're always looking for different ways to do some of the fund investing and not just investing in bonds and hedging instruments.
And how are you handling a hybrid environment?
Yeah, so right now we're flexible and the team comes in 3 days a week, which is, and then some of the team is remote, but I think we're getting pretty good at it now. Where we try to do a lot of team building. We instituted something where we have a lunch and learn or a team building event once a month, and somebody we rotate who's responsible for it. So we have done things like, fitness classes to bowling and go-karting, and we did something on last month on ERISA fiduciary litigation stuff. So it spans between like really serious things and just fun, active things. But we always try to come together as a group and do something that's fun.
In your philosophy, like if someone wants to make it into the CIO seat someday, do they need to be in the office?
Yes, absolutely. Because you can only learn so much on Zoom, and I realize that, if we go and we meet with an investment manager, if we do it on Zoom, everybody says goodbye, we hang up, and nobody talks about it, right? So when we're in the office and we meet with an investment manager and then they leave, we all group around somebody's desk and we pick apart the strategy. And that's the only way that people can learn from each other about the advantages and disadvantages and who's thinking about things differently. I think you have to learn from other people, right? You have to learn from other groups, interactions. You have to be in sort of cross-functional projects, whatever they are. And I don't know if you can truly develop, especially if you're younger, in your living room behind a screen. You really need to get out there and be with people. Maybe not 5 days a week, but at least half of the time.
Also active in other projects. You mentioned a bit about the PBGC, but outside of your work at RTX, you spent years at the leadership levels at SIVA. Can you talk about some of the themes there?
Yeah, so SIVA is an organization of CIOs, some of the largest and mid-sized CIOs. We manage a lot of assets collectively. We get together once a quarter, and it's really an organization that has been incredible to my career because it's people that have my job and everywhere else and all the other corporations, and we just benchmark on everything. So we have a committee on DC plans, we have a committee on DV plans, we have an investment committee. But our main focus years ago was actually we always met in Washington, DC, because we wanted to try to shape and educate Congress and legislators on retirement benefits and things that they may possibly do that can hurt employee benefits. So that was the main function of the group. But over time, we still do a lot of that, try to shape policy, but we also help each other be better corporate plan CIOs. And it's just been an amazing group for me. We have different committees and vice chairs and co-chairs, and I think I've chaired all the committees. I chaired SIVA myself, and now I'm on the board. And as we start to bring some of the younger folks, it's just really such a dynamic organization. And we've done a lot as a group together to try to shape the industry.
What are some of the things you've taken a legislative stand on?
Yeah, so oh boy, there was about 10 years ago when we knew that a lot of what the DOL was doing or Treasury was doing was going to close pension plans because of the accounting rules that were changing, the limit of smoothing. When they had something that was called PPA, it was a legislation. We went and we talked to various legislators to try to have them tweak the law to benefit the plans, and it actually worked. There was a fiduciary rule that came out a while back. It's been very controversial for a lot of different reasons, but we as CIOs wanted the fiduciary rule because we knew that when our participants retired or left the company, there were a lot of bad actors that were trying to grab their assets and make them pay really high fees. So we wanted the DOL to say, if you're going to take a rollover of retirement assets, you need to be a fiduciary and act as a fiduciary. And we we went, as a matter of fact, I went to the White House to actually talk to Obama's, I think it was corporate secretary or something at the time, because he wanted to understand, is this something that they should support, the fiduciary rule? And throughout time with the DOL, they keep on changing it. But one thing that they haven't changed is that if you're going to take retirement assets, you should be a fiduciary. And so we fight for things like that to protect our participants with the DOL or with Congress.
And currently, what are some of the threats that you're seeing to the industry?
Well, there's been a couple of large plans that have been outsourced to asset managers. And, we saw this trend a couple years back. And what ended up happening is all the plans that were outsourced actually ended up coming back to the corporation. And now we're seeing it again. There's been some very large visible plans that have been outsourced to large asset managers or actuaries. And I think that this could be a damaging trend, not only because I'm a CIO and it's because it's taken away our work, but I also think that being a team inside a company has a lot of benefits to an organization. So I'm not just a CIO who's trying to make investment returns on a company. I'm part of the finance committee. I listen to what's happening in the company, and I try to make sure that whatever we're doing in the pension plan doesn't hurt, but would help all the finances in the company, and at the same time make sure that our participants are being well taken care of. So I think what ends up happening is with these large firms, they come into the CEOs and the CFOs who may not understand everything that's happening in the pension fund, and they say, you're not in the core business of managing pensions. We can do it for you cheaper, in a smarter way. And we found time after time that that's not really the case, because as a fiduciary, you still have to be a fiduciary and oversee that manager. And what ends up over time is you lose that entire expertise in the company, and there's no one overseeing that manager. And that manager is now not looking out in the best interest of the company. They just want to increase fees, and there's nobody sort of overseeing them. So over time, they're not really tied in to the management issues of the company. And it can be self-serving. Now, I'm not saying the OCIO business is bad by any means. For some plans, it makes a lot of sense. Some mid-sized plans, smaller plans, some plans that want to get out of the business. But I think it's one of those things that might be a trend that might go swing too far, and that senior management really has to pay attention to what the CIOs and their team are doing to make a really well-educated decision. Is this what makes sense for us in the long term? Because I think in many cases it doesn't.
So if you're a CIO and you're, let's say, in the crosshairs of a takeover by an OCIO, what's some of your advice as to prove your strengths in keeping that internal investment?
A lot of times, unfortunately, this is all done behind the CIO's back. So the CIO isn't aware of it, and the team's not aware of it until it happens. So what we need to do as an organization is make sure that we do a better job of educating our CFOs and our CEOs on what the real issues are and the pros and cons of going to an OCIO, and mainly the cons. And then make sure that, remember, one of the things I said of how to be successful is that you really understand what the company needs, what their mission is, and how you fit into the company. And you can't view yourself as only a team that just gets good investment returns. You have to view yourself as an integral part, or a manager, an executive who helps the company manage the pension fund and not just being an investor. So I think some of the ways that, in SEBA's, we've talked about this, is really arming our members with, a checklist of, here's what the OCIOs are saying, and here's really, what the facts are. And, make sure that your senior managers understand this, so that if the large players go and, they're buddies from old college days and say, I can manage this for you, that they step back and they get you involved in the decision.
Which brings us to the question of, Robin, you've been in this business, in this industry for decades. You've made your changes across the board.
Yeah.
But what, looking back on your career, what, as a Hall of Famer, would you like your legacy to be?
Oh, legacy. Well, first of all, for RTX, I want to sort of ride in the sunset to say, okay, I'm done. We're completely fully funded. We're at an end state. We're hibernated, and our senior management does not have to worry about the pension plan again. So that
How
would be one
close are
legacy.
you?
Pardon
Yeah,
me?
I should
I'm
ask.
close.
How
I'm
close
close.
are you?
I'm close. I'm close enough that at least if I leave, the rest of the team can get there without a problem. So I would say that's one legacy. And, and there's a couple others. I want to try to make an impact on what I think the retirement crisis is, and, for other people, and maybe provide the means where other people can get educated on, some of the issues. I think potentially when I retire, I'd like to do some financial literacy training, not the college kids, not the high school kids, but start even younger, like in a junior achievement. And then also an impact on, diversity, and really make sure that, all people have access to retirement, the ability to save for retirement, and the knowledge and the education and the systems around, so that there's sort of equality in that. I think that's extremely important.
Last question. What's the Robin like outside of work? What are your hobbies? What are your passions? What do you do for fun? When do you get goofy?
Boring, super boring. So I have a wife and two teenage daughters, and I try to spend as much time as I can with them. I love to play pickleball and run and exercise and travel, and just really try to be active. Love the beach, and I don't know. And I don't read self-help books. I read fun fiction, and it depends on what it is over time. Used to be vampire romance novels, and now it's fiction, but it's a little bit more educational fiction, but it rotates through time.
Well, it sounds like you have a very full life between the work, the career, and the kids and everything. So thank you so much for making time here. And
Thank you for having me. Loved it.
Learned a lot. And we're looking forward to your Hall of Fame ceremony in the fall. So
thank you. So excited about it. Thank you, Christine.
Me too. Until then, I see you. This is Robin Diamonte, CIO of RTX. Thanks, Robin.